Hey guys, so this should be the last video here. We've talked about some cool things with calling in the Bible, um, talked about Moses and Peter already, looking at their life call and kind of the significance of a life call in the Bible. And so there's some different ways that this really plays out. That's what this next slide is about. Um, so normally so we already looked at Peter's example. We're going to look at Paul's in a minute, and these are some other examples of life call and kind of the distinctions. So for Mary, she was directed by God to have Christ, to bear a son, Jesus. Nehemiah's, I'm not going to hit on his a whole lot, but there's this idea that sometimes our life call can be discreet or a little less clear, or at least initially, in terms of God's plan for us and what we're called to do. But I would say for most people, their life call is kind of a mixture of Paul's and Peter's, which is discovered and developed. And there's some nuances to whether or not they're both discovered or developed. But those are the two things I want you guys to take away from this. So there's most likely your life call is going to be both discovered and developed. So it's going to be developed over time, and it's going to be discovered. You're not just going to like wake up one day and know what your calling is, like Mary did. Or, you might get an angel from the Lord to visit you, but most people don't. So, but that doesn't mean you don't have a life call. So your life call. So we looked at some of the nuances of that, and so how we're going to discover that and get started on that at the calling retreat is it's revealed as we look inward. Yeah, you guys can't really see that, but revealed as we look inward to ourselves and then outward to the world around us and our circumstances. So that's the way we're going to begin to process and discover our life call together through CoPassion. So Paul, I want to give you a couple things about him. So he has a really cool life call as well. He meets Christ on the road. You can read through the book of Acts, and you'll get Paul's life call. But I'm going to go through briefly here a couple things. So he meets Christ on the road. He meets with the leaders of the church. Just so you get another example, he is set apart. He gets called to this mission to reach the Gentiles, a specific group of people. He parts ways with this group, with this guy named Barnabas. And then most of the back half of Acts is Paul's adventures or story of how he's traveling through Asia and Europe and preaching the gospel to lots of people who don't know anything about God. And then he has some bumps in the road. He gets persecuted and imprisoned several times for preaching Jesus. And then eventually he ends up in Rome. He gets badly shipwrecked on his journey there, almost dies on his way to Rome. He gets imprisoned in Rome for several years until his eventual death. But what's really cool is that God really redeems some of these hardships and trials he goes through towards the end of his life in his kind of ministry career. And so Paul, while he's in jail, writes half of the books or letters, so they're letters to churches, but he writes half of the books in the Bible or in the New Testament, basically. So he has this huge contribution to the church, in this really cool way that God uses him in his calling as well. Yeah, so Paul, just to be clear, Paul's story was both discovered and developed. So he got a clear message from God on kind of his general direction in life. But then it was also developed. He was an outsider from the church initially, became a leader, kind of charted his own path and had many trials, and eventually got to do some really cool things in terms of his writings for the church. So wrapping up, the big idea here is you have a life call from God, and this is one of the main things we're going to be talking about. And one of the examples, but kind of one of the main examples besides our primary calling to know God, is our secondary calling, our life call in the Bible. It's usually developed over time, but there's also some direction in there, and the process of discovering that. And so we all have a unique life call. That's kind of the big thing I want you guys to take away. It's based off, Ephesians 2:10. We are God's masterpiece. And so that's really the big thing we're going to be discovering is that, what is my unique life call that God's given to me, kind of getting a peek into what is God's plan for my life. That's right. That's the big question. In some ways, that's why we're here. So hopefully this was helpful for you guys, just looking at calling in the Bible. And we're going to be continuing to look at that more next weekend. We'll see you guys there.